A lot of people quietly believe this. If I work hard, earn a decent salary, and keep getting raises, wealth should eventually show up on its own. And then 10 or 15 years go by, and the feeling is strange. You've been responsible. You've been busy. You've made money, but you don't feel rich. You feel like the paycheck arrives, and then it disappears. That's not because you failed. And it doesn't mean your income doesn't matter. It means you may be measuring the wrong thing. Here's the calm truth. A salary creates cash flow, not automatic wealth. The principle in this video is simple. Long-term wealth usually grows when you consistently turn part of your paycheck into ownership of diversified productive assets and then give that ownership time to compound. I call it the turn flow into ownership rule. That is the whole game, not prediction, not hot stock picks, not finding a shortcut. Turn flow into ownership over and over for a long time. And just to keep the frame clean, this is education, not personalized financial advice. I'm explaining a principle, not telling you what to personally buy. Start with the basic distinction that most people were never really taught. Income is money coming in. Net worth is what you own minus what you owe. Those are not the same thing. Someone can have solid income and still build very little net worth if most of that money is immediately spoken for by taxes, housing, debt payments, and lifestyle costs. You've probably seen some version of this. Imagine someone saying, "I make good money, so why do I still feel behind?" On payday, they feel successful. By the end of the month, they feel squeezed again. Nothing dramatic happened. The money just flowed through. That's why the turn flow into ownership rule matters so much. If all the flow keeps moving out, there is nothing left to accumulate. A job is not the problem. In fact, for most people, the job is the foundation. But a paycheck is fuel, not the finished structure. It gives you the ability to build wealth. It is not the same thing as having wealth. Another useful way to think about this is human capital versus financial capital. Human capital is your ability to earn through your time, skill, effort, and experience. Your 9-to-5 monetizes that. It can be extremely valuable, but it is usually active. To get the next dollar, you typically need more hours, more energy, more training, or more responsibility. Financial capital is different. That is money already converted into assets. And those assets can continue working without each dollar being re-earned from scratch through new labor. Think of your job like a bicycle. It moves you forward, but only while you keep pedaling. Productive assets are more like planting trees. At first, it feels unimpressive. You plant, water, wait. But over time, the trees can keep growing and bearing fruit without you digging the same hole every day. Or use the pipe and reservoir image. A salary is water flowing through a pipe. Wealth is the reservoir you build by capturing some of that flow instead of letting all of it run out. Most people focus only on increasing the flow rate. That matters, of course. But if the reservoir never gets built, high flow can still leave you with very little stored up. So what does ownership mean here in plain English? It means owning productive assets, things that participate in economic activity rather than just being consumed. For everyday investors, the most common general example is diversified ownership of many businesses through broad stock funds or similar vehicles, sometimes balanced with bonds depending on goals and risk tolerance. Not picking one winner. Not gambling on the next exciting story. Broad ownership. Why does that matter? Because now you are not only selling your hours, you also own a tiny piece of a much larger machine that keeps producing. Businesses sell products, provide services, earn profits, reinvest, adapt, and grow over time. Historically, diversified productive assets have been a common engine of long-term wealth, though returns are never guaranteed and the path is never smooth. That is why the turn flow into ownership rule is so powerful. Your paycheck funds the process. Ownership becomes the engine. Now, this is where people get impatient because the process feels slow at first. Compounding is the reason. Compounding simply means returns earn their own returns over time. Early on, it looks almost boring. Your contributions do most of the work. Later, if you stay consistent long enough, the portfolio itself starts doing more of the lifting. Picture a hypothetical investor who puts $500 a month from a paycheck into a diversified investment portfolio. Let's keep the math clearly illustrative and simple, not predictive. Say they do that for 20 years, contributing about $120,000 in total, and imagine the portfolio grows at a rough average of 7% a year over that full period. that could grow to about $260,000. Now imagine a second worker with the same salary who never converts that monthly flow into ownership and ends that period with about the $120,000 they managed to set aside in cash over time. That is a gap of about $140,000, and it came from giving invested assets time to work in the background. Again, that is only an illustration using round numbers and a stated assumption, not a promise. What matters in that example is not the exact outcome. It is the pattern. At first, progress feels small. Then, later, growth increasingly comes from what has already been built. Over long stretches, time and consistency often matter more than brilliance. And this is exactly why many good earners still don't build much wealth. Not because they are lazy, not because they needed some genius move. Usually because lifestyle inflation quietly eats the entire advantage. Lifestyle inflation is the silent leak in the system. Income rises, and spending rises right with it. Better apartment, bigger car payment, more subscriptions, more convenience, more little upgrades that feel reasonable because, taken one by one, they usually are. The issue is not one purchase. The issue is that every raise gets fully assigned before it ever becomes ownership. Imagine a worker who gets a promotion and thinks, "Finally, I've made it." But within months, the higher paycheck has already been absorbed. Their lifestyle improved, but their balance sheet barely moved. That happens all the time. Raises without investing are like pouring more water into a bucket with a bigger drain. You feel more flow, but not necessarily more accumulation. Now, picture two workers with the same salary. One spends nearly every raise as it comes. The other automatically directs part of every paycheck into diversified ownership. 10 or 20 years later, their incomes might still look similar on paper, but their net worth can look very different because one followed the turn flow into ownership rule and the other didn't. That is also where behavior becomes everything. The mistake that wrecks this is not usually choosing the wrong headline. It is breaking the system, stopping contributions because progress feels slow, panic selling when markets fall, treating investing like entertainment, or assuming a bigger future salary will fix a habit of consuming every dollar today. The way around that is plain, not flashy. Make the process systematic. Keep costs low where you can. Use broad diversification as a concept instead of trying to prove you are smarter than the market every week. Think in decades, not weekends. Let the boring middle years happen. Those years are not wasted. They are where the reservoir is being built. A 9-to-5 can absolutely help build wealth. In most cases, it is the starting point. It creates the cash flow. But cash flow alone is not the destination. If all you ever do is trade time for pay and then spend nearly all of it, you can work hard for a long time and still feel stuck. The shift is simple. Stop asking only, "How much do I earn?" Start asking, "How much of that flow is becoming ownership?" That question changes everything because it moves you from just earning to actually accumulating. That is the long-term takeaway. You stop measuring progress only by salary and start measuring it by the assets quietly building behind the scenes. You become a patient, systematic investor. You let compounding do what it only does for people who give it time. And you keep following the same repeatable idea, the turn flow into ownership rule. If this helps simplify the difference between earning money and building wealth, take that thought with you. And if you want more calm, evidence-based investing ideas without the hype, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.